A very warm welcome to all of you here at the True Cost Accounting in Food and Farming meeting. I am Ken Wilson. I'm the director of the Christensen Fund, a foundation that, among other things, works in the food area, and I also chair the steering committee of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. That apparently gives me obligations to chair this morning's session, so we'll see how we get on. As I'm sure you're all feeling this morning, today is, we're still, I think, as a planet in mourning for Nelson Mandela. Like I'm sure many of you have been talking about this a lot with friends and family, and feeling, I suppose, that with the passing of, one of the greatest people of the last century, really it's a reminder to us to take those kind of leadership and moral stand and all the rest of it. On that somber note, I will hand over immediately to Patrick Holden to give us a sense of how we got here.
Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you all. And I'd like to start by thanking you all for being here. And many of you have come from far, far away, in some cases literally from the other side of the world. And some of you, about 100 of you, have been with us for the last 2 days in an intensive meeting to discuss the theme of this conference, more of which in a moment. Before I do what I'm charged to do on the program, which is tell you the story behind this event, I want to make some thank yous, because without the support of an incredible host of foundations and NGOs and others, this event and the 2 days previous to it wouldn't have taken place. And those supporters are the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Without the support of those two crucial foundations, we literally wouldn't be here. And then a large number of other foundations contribute in significant ways. The Owsley Brown Charitable Foundation, and I want to mention Christy Brown in particular with reference to that, and her son Owsley, both of whom are here. The V.K. Rasmussen Foundation, the Prince's Trusts, the Tudor Trust, who gave a grant to enable people who wouldn't otherwise have been able to afford to be here to come, and so we're particularly grateful for that. The McKnight Foundation, the Grace Communications Foundation, the Marmot Trust, the Esme Fairbairn Charitable Foundation, two of the Sainsbury's Trusts, Triodos Bank, Compassion in World Farming, RSPB, the National Trust, and then a whole host of volunteers who I want to just say, because those of you that were there last night at the reception, it was very, very moving. The number of people who are just giving up their time to help make this, these days, the success they already have been and hopefully will continue this morning. And musicians and food producers as well, who made yesterday evening so memorable. So I think just the fact that so many individuals and organizations have contributed to making this event what it hopefully will be today is just important to note. So now to the story. An executive summary of it is that 3 years ago, a group of leaders of the food movement, charitable foundations movement, welfare, conservation, environmental, academics from all over the world met together and concluded that in the light of the fact that the present economics of our food systems are distorted in such a way that the financial consequences of the actions of farmers using different systems of food production are not reflected either in the prices of the food, for the food that farmers get or what consumers pay in the shops, had led to a state of affairs which needed action. And that resolve led to a series of meetings over the last 3 years, which culminated in a decision to hold a 2-day workshop where we would bring together some of the leaders who, with expertise in this field of what economists call agricultural externalities, but we are calling true cost accounting in food and farming, to try to get a handle on what has gone wrong and to do something about it. And where the theme of today is to pick up from where we left off, and we're going to have a little impressionistic review of what happened over the last 2 days in a moment. But that's the dry version. And I wanted to, there's been a lot of discussion yesterday about narrative and stories and how sometimes you can bring things to light in a different way if you make them into a story. So here's the very brief story of what came to pass. I suspect every single one of you here, when you were a child, you either looked at or had read to you by your mum a children's storybook which depicted a family farm. And I'm trying to imagine it because I was one of them. And there was the farmyard with the ruddy-faced farmer who probably is just emerging from the milking shed, and his wife and children, and maybe a stone wall around the edge of the farmyard. And there are chickens and there are pigs, and there are some cows in a beautiful field just in the background with a hedge around it with lots of wildlife and flowers, and there are birds. And then there's another field which is growing corn, which is just nearly ready to be harvested. And there's an atmosphere of happiness and content and a feeling when you're a child that somehow you're connected with this beautiful story of this farm and that you love it and you feel it's part of you. And of course it is part of you because you're eating the food from it. So you're intimately connected emotionally and physically with this story. So that's the bit that we got when we were children. And then, and this is the sort of slightly darker bit, perhaps for when we're a little bit older, a strange spell fell upon the lands, and people were possessed with some sort of orthodoxy and a mantra. No one's really sure about what it was caused by. It might have been something in the water. It happened about 60 years ago, and the mantra was the need for cheap food. And everyone fell under this spell. And the spell involved an amnesia which disconnected people from the consequences of the actions in order to get the cheap food. So everyone forgot that in order to get cheap food, there would be emissions, and there would be destruction of soil and nature, and there would be pollution, and there would be terrible consequences to animal welfare. But such was the strength of the spell that we were all under, that this continued, and the small family farms gradually gave up because they just couldn't survive in this tremendously powerful drive towards ever cheaper food. And don't forget that people were doing this with the best of possible intentions, but somehow they forgot the consequences of their actions. But there were a few people who stood up against this. Let's call them sects, this big sort of mantra and this orthodoxy, almost like a religion of cheap food, which prevailed everywhere. The media were into it, the politicians, most people liked it because it gave them cheap food. But a few people stood up, the environmentalists stood up and said, this can't be right, this is going to end up in tears. The animal welfarists stood up against it. And then some interestingly naive people who were called the sustainable food movement. They said, and I think some of them had been to San Francisco, so they drunk some different water. And they said, very naively, this water made them very naive and well-intentioned, and they said, surely, if we just put the price of all these externalities on the food, we can create a different market and everything's going to be fine. And so we did, and we struggled away, and it was good for a time, but in truth, even the sustainable food movement, putting all those costs on the price of the food, couldn't break through. And then eventually, now we're getting close to today, the leaders who'd stood up against this all along got together again and said, something must be done. It's no good just witnessing this destruction of environmental capital, the consequences for public health, for loss of biodiversity, for loss of soil. We have to think about this systemically, and we have to get together, we have to make a plan, or at least start to make a plan, and then we need to turn it out to the public, because we will never change this situation, break this spell which everyone has been under, unless we share this story and our conclusion about what needs to be done about it with a wider public. And now we're right up to date. So this begs the question, what's going to happen next? And we don't know, because this day is the beginning, hopefully, of a process. It's arguably the largest international gathering that has ever taken place, with the incredible, eminent people that we've got here today addressing this theme of true cost accounting in food and farming. And we hope that it will be the beginning of a journey when we move forward and we move into a happier land, more like the children's story, but not quite the same, where we all live happily ever after. But if you go back to the story again, think about this. What is often part of the solution? A charming prince. And in this case, we didn't just have a charming prince. We had a visionary prince who actually was instrumental in bringing about these meetings in the first place. And so now it's my great pleasure and my privilege to hand the word over to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, who actually met the workshop people yesterday, couldn't be here this morning, but is so passionate about this issue that he wanted to say this to us all.